in these notes, we're going to be adding one more method for solving quadratic equations. This time we're going to be using a formula. So this is a formula called the quadratic formula, and it is a plug-and-play process. Any quadratic equation can be solved using this formula. So we've looked at square root, we've looked at completing the square, we've looked at solving by factoring. These are all great methods. We're going to look today at a method that will work no matter what the polynomial looks like. It's not always the easiest method, depending on your polynomial, depending on your quadratic equation, but it is the most consistent in that it always works. So for any polynomial in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, so standard form, highest degree first, here's the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, all under the square root, over 2a. So all we do is take these numbers. A goes here and here. B goes here and here. And then C goes here. Plugging these numbers in and then evaluating the formula will give us the two solutions for the equation. Now, really quick, this bit right here under the radical, b squared minus 4ac, this is known as the discriminant. You can use the discriminant to figure out how many solutions your quadratic equation has. We won't go into that today in these notes, but it is an important tool that will be used later on. So for all these equations, we're just going to fill in a, b, and c and solve for x. So, number one, we have x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. And again, the formula is right here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. So let's go ahead and fill that in, and it might be helpful to write down, we have 1, that's our a value. Negative 2 is our b value. Negative 8 is the c value. So let's see, we have x equals negative b. Well, b is negative 2, so negative b would be positive 2, plus or minus the square root. B squared, that's negative 2, squared is positive 4, minus 4 times 1 times negative 8, because 1 is a, negative 8 is c, all over 2a, a is 1, so that's just 2. I know I did a few calculations there as I wrote it down. Honestly, that's the quickest way. So now let's simplify a little bit. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root. Now we have 4 minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. Let's just figure out what that is. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 8, that's positive 32. So this is going to be 4 plus 32 all over 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of, that's 36 all over 2. The square root of 36 is 6. So x equals 2 plus or minus 6 divided by 2. And now we can just evaluate what those two numbers are. So x is going to equal 2 plus 6 is 8, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then 2 minus 6 is negative 4, divided by 2 is negative 2. So using this formula, excuse me, using this formula, we can find our two solutions. They won't always work out to be whole numbers like this, integers, but very frequently they will. Now for number 2, we do have to get this equation into standard form by moving this negative 10 to the other side. So that would be x squared, maybe I write it above, x squared plus 2x plus 10 equals 0 is our standard form. And then we know that a is 1, b is 2, and c is 10. So now we can plug this into the formula. X equals, what just happened? Let me fix that really quick. So it's over 2, and x equals, we got 4 and negative 2. Okay, back to number 2. X equals negative b, so b is 2, so negative b is negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So b squared, that's 2 squared, is 4, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10, all over 2a. A is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. And now we simplify. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root. Now here we can probably do this all at once. So we have 4 times 10, which is 40. So we have 4 minus 40 inside, which is negative 36, all over 2. Well, we know what the square root of negative 36 is. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus, that's 6i over 2. And because that I is there, we can't actually find the two numbers, so we're going to leave our answers just like this. Now, if you needed to split those up, that'd be x equals negative 2 plus 6i over 2, and negative 2 minus 6i over 2. What we can do is simplify this a little bit, because all these numbers are even, so we can actually divide them all by 2. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus 3i, and then that 2 on the bottom is going to be a 1, which doesn't, if you have a 1 in the denominator, it kind of goes away. So this is the answer here, negative 1 plus or minus 3i. Let's look at number 3. 3t squared minus 7t minus 20 equals 0. Now, if you have t instead of x, you're going to do the same thing. You can just write t instead of x right here, or you can just write x, change it, but you know, you should keep the variable the same. But remember, the goal is to get the answers, so it doesn't necessarily matter. So t equals negative b, which is positive 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Here, b squared is 49 minus 4 times 3 times negative 20, that's a and c, all over 2a, which is 2 times 3 is 6. And now we can simplify. So t equals 7 plus or minus the square root, now let's figure out what this is, negative 4 times 3 times negative 20. Well, that's 240, positive 240. So in our square root here, we have 289. Because those two negatives do make a positive, so we have 49 plus 240, all over 6. Now, luckily, the square root of 289 is an integer. 289 is a perfect square. And so t equals 7 plus or minus, the square root of 289 is 17. So t equals 7 plus or minus 17 over 6. And now we can actually figure out what those values are. So here t equals 7 plus 17 is 24. 24 divided by 6 is 4. 7 minus 17 is negative 10 over 6. Now we're going to get a fraction here. Negative 10 over 6 can be reduced to negative 5 over 3, and that's how we should write our answer. So oftentimes you will have a whole number and a fraction, and that's okay. Just remember how reducing a fraction works, you'll be fine. Let's look at number 4. And just as a reminder, let's go ahead and write this out here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Just as a reminder. So for number 4, we do have to move this around and get it into standard form. And we'll do that by adding 5y to both sides. So 2y squared plus 5y minus 3 equals 0. And now we can plug this into the formula. So y equals negative b, well b here is 5, so negative b is negative 5, plus or minus the square root. B squared is 5 times 5 is 25, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 3, all over 2a, and a is 2, so 2 times 2 is 4. And now we can simplify. In the discriminant, we have this negative 4 times 2 times negative 3. That is positive 24. Negative 8 times negative 3, positive 24. So when we simplify this, y equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, now 25 plus 24 is 49 over 4. That's nice because that's a perfect square. So y equals negative 5 plus or minus 7 over 4. And so we can get our final two answers here. Solutions are y equals negative 5 plus 7 is 2, and 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. Negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12, divided by 4 is negative 3. So 1/2 and negative 3 are our two solutions here. Let me scoot those over just a little bit. There we go. Probably didn't leave enough room for each of these problems, but we're doing just fine. All right, number 5. N squared plus 4n equals negative 5. We do need to write this in standard form. So n squared plus 4n plus 5 equals 0. And now we use the formula. So n equals opposite of b, negative b. b here is 4, so negative 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 16, 4 times 4 is 16, minus 4 times a is 1, times c is 5, all over 2a. a is 1, so that's just 2. And now we simplify. N equals negative 4 plus or minus, let's do the inside here. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. So we have 16 minus 20, which is negative 4 inside the square root, all over 2. Okay, we know what the square root of negative 4 is. So n equals negative 4 plus or minus 2i all over 2. And once again, just like we saw in number 2, we do have all these even numbers here, which we can divide by that denominator, which is 2. So n equals negative 2 plus or minus I, and then there would be over 1, but as a fraction, we don't need to put a denominator of 1, so this is it. Moving on, number 6. 5v squared minus 5v plus 8 equals 2v plus 9, so we're going to have to move both of these. We'll subtract 2v and we'll subtract 9. So 5v squared, negative 5v minus 2v is negative 7v. 8 minus 9 is negative 1, equals 0. So move everything over, set your equation to 0, and now we are in a form we can use. So the formula, v equals the opposite of b. b is negative 7, so that's 7 plus or minus the square root. b squared is negative 7 squared is 49, minus 4 times 5 times negative 1, that's a and c, all over 2a. a is 5, so that is 10. 2 times 5 is 10. Now let's simplify. Inside the radical, negative 4 times 5 times negative 1 is going to be positive 20. So v equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 69 all over 10. Now, looking at 69, that is not a perfect square, and it does not have any perfect square factors because 69 is 23 times 3. 23 is prime, 3 is prime, so this is actually all we can do. Check to simplify. 7 is prime, 10 doesn't divide into 7, so this is it. Just leave your answer just like that. 7 plus or minus the square root of 69 over 10. All right, number 8. Quite a bit to move. Just two terms again, but we're going to subtract 2m squared and the 18m. So 4m squared minus 2m squared is 2m squared. 10m minus 18m is negative 8m. Minus 2 equals 0. So now that we've moved our other two terms over, we can use the formula. So m equals negative b. So b here is negative 8. Negative b is positive 8. Plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac. So b squared here is 64. Negative 8 squared is 64. Minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 2. All over 2a, and 2 times 2 is 4. Let's consider the inside. Negative 4 times 2 times negative 2 is positive 16. So now we can do that. M equals 8 plus and minus 64 plus 16 is 80 all over 4. Now we can simplify the square root of 80. Let's just check that out over here. So the square root of 80, now that is 16 times 5. And the square root of 16 is 4. So this is 4 square root 5. So we can simplify that. So m equals 8 plus or minus 4 square root 5 all over 4, which is a good answer. But if you notice, we can divide all these numbers by 4. 8, 4, and 4. So our simplified answer, m equals 8 divided by 4 is 2, plus or minus, well, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we just had the square root of 5 there. And then a denominator of 1, which we don't have to write. So just 2 plus and minus the square root of 5. And that is a fine answer there. If we notice back in our original equation, these numbers are all divisible by 2. So if we had divided this whole equation by 2 first, we could have, and that would have made our answer a little simpler. We probably would have gone straight to this. But if you don't notice, you can just simplify at the end. All right, let's look at number 9. Now, number 9, we could probably solve using just the square root. We could divide by 3 and then take the square root. But let's see what happens if we use the quadratic formula, because that's what these notes are all about. So let's put this in standard form. We have 3x squared plus, or minus 27 equals 0. Well, there is no b term here. So here's what you should think of. B is actually 0. 3x squared plus 0x minus 27 equals 0. So let's see what happens if we try to fill in the quadratic formula now. So x equals opposite of b, well, the opposite of 0 is just 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is just 0, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 27, all over 2a, and 2 times 3 is 6. So let's simplify the radical. So that's x equals, now that 0 in the front, we don't need it, so just plus or minus square root, 4 times 3 times 27 is 324, all over 6. And now the square root of 324 is 18. So x equals positive and negative 18 over 6. Then we can just divide those two numbers. So x equals 18 divided by 6 is 3. Negative 18 divided by 6 is negative 3. So we do still get those same answers, but this process using the formula for this particular problem is probably not the easiest method. However, as you can see, it does work. So probably we could have used just solving by square roots, just divide by 3, take the square root, 2 steps. And that is what I would recommend. If you see a quadratic equation where you know an easier solution method, definitely use it. But the quadratic formula does always work no matter what the quadratic equation looks like. So there you have it, the formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a.